You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
It's 5:39, and today is October 13th, 2020, and I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Police Commissioners to order. I'd like to first ask for approval of the minutes of the Monday, September 14th, 2020 meeting. Can I have a motion to approve, please?
I'll make a motion. I'll second John's motion.
All in favor, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Passes unanimously. At this point, I want to turn this over to Chief Mulhern for the report of the chief, CompStat report, etc.
All right. Thank you. Before I get into the chief's report or the CompStat report, I just want to touch on the fact that on September 19th, we lost Officer Christopher Manor after a short battle with an illness. Officer Manor had done a long, distinguished career with North Branford PD before coming over here about 8 years ago. And I can tell you that he was a mentor to many, many of the officers here. He was a pleasure to be around. His smile would light up the room and make your day. Throughout this, we stuck together. The men and women of the department and the community supported him at every chance we got. I personally want to thank the support of the community and the people that came forward. And I know the family really, really appreciated everything that was done. And I know how much the members of the department here appreciated that. So it was a very solemn time. I said we lost a good one. We did. And we will miss his smile. We'll miss his presence. But we will always have him here with us. As far as other personnel issues, Detective Joe Hurton has retired from the South Central Regional SWAT team after many, many years. Joe was on one of the first teams here in Branford and then migrated over to the regional team. He was a tenured officer there with a lot of experience. But now in his role as a detective, he felt it was time to move on. And we've replaced his position with Officer Rocco Morgan. After a long, vigorous tryout procedure, he met the mark. So he starts his new journey with the regional team. We'll be going with some in-depth training at the end of the month. As far as research training, we put a big block of officers through their upcoming recertification cycle. I mentioned this as we continue to move forward with the COVID times, and we're mixing in some online training and limiting in-person training. I'd like to point out that Lieutenant Carangelo, previously Lieutenant Dione, she just got married. Lieutenant Carangelo has done a deep, in-depth look at our training and how we're going to go forward with not only our research training, but the training that we want to institute to face these challenging times, as I've talked about many times. So she's coming up with some new models for us, and we're contracting with a few vendors to do some online training. I think it might be a little more efficient. We might realize some cost savings to help offset some of the increase in training that I predict. And again, we're going to battle with this COVID issue. It seems like this winter is going to present some challenges again. So some of the one-on-one in-person physical training is going to be tough. We're going to have to look at that. Along those lines, also, we're in the process of upgrading our telestaff scheduling software. It's a big project that we're nearing rollout right now. Should result in some better features with our staffing and our scheduling, as well as remote phone access for the officers, as well as a interface with town hall and our payroll processing. The Axon body camera program is finished. Captain Galdenzi has wrapped that up. The last camera and training was done. These are state-of-the-art Axon cameras with the cloud storage. Again, a big thanks to our IT department and help negotiating that contract. And again, the town for supporting it. As you know, the body cameras are back in the news, and we can't envision ever sending an officer out in the street without them. But now they have the newest and best, and we're in good shape with that. So much appreciated, and I'm glad we undertook that when we did. One other issue I want to bring up real quick is, pursuant to the Police Accountability Bill, one of the mandates was that each police department look at how we could integrate, or the feasibility of social workers in dealing with some of our mental health calls. So the deputy chief took on this project, and I just want to turn it over to him for a brief synopsis of where he stands and what we did. He completed a very detailed report, which I can share with you next month, and Dominique did a fantastic analysis. So just take a minute. I'll turn it over to the DC for a summary of that.
So the call to action for us, based on the Accountability Act, was to implement this study, basically looking at, can we replace police officers on health calls for service with social workers, or have social workers accompany us on calls for service where they can provide some assistance. So we conducted a study to analyze our current response. We looked at our strengths, our weaknesses. The study, as the chief mentioned, included an excellent data analysis by our crime analyst, Dominique Bergolto. We did a department-wide survey to solicit officers' input regarding training, use of force, duty services, and our current response. We also looked at nationwide models for both replacing officers on mental health calls for service or collaborating with social service agencies. So what we learned is, well, one, social workers have no intention of replacing us on these calls for service, nor do they want to. We learned that we do have a very high rate of responding to mental health calls for service here in the town of Branford, somewhat higher than some surrounding towns. We learned that there's always room to improve. We recognize that. And can we better provide services through some of the models that we investigated? We agreed that, that is some of the potential outcomes. So we reached out to Branford Counseling Center, BH Care, and formed a task force along with the help of Director of Human Resources, Margaret Liberta, to figure out ways that we can continue moving forward and in collaboration. So looking at certain models, we favor a police social worker model where a social worker can be working here in our building amongst us. There's a lot of benefits that we see for an agency our size in that model. So our task force is continuing to work on meet on a bi-weekly basis. Funding obviously is an issue. That's the biggest issue here. So we're looking at grant opportunities on both the state and federal level. We're currently, just to make some progress moving forward, we're sharing our police reports on health calls for service with these agencies. And these agencies are BH Care and Branford Counseling. They're going out into the field and looking and providing services to these individuals that we previously dealt with. So we're also conducting trainings on services that are currently offered by these agencies, so our officers are aware of the services that they can provide And we're also looking at crisis intervention training for all officers in our police department. That's where we're at.
Could I ask you a question or two about this?
Sure.
First question is, what percentage of our calls for service is, these kind of cases?
I can't give you a percentage, but what I can tell you is that based on the analysis that, daily, we're going to mental health calls and health calls for service on a daily basis, sometimes several times per day. And then there's interactions that are sometimes difficult to calculate. There may be underlying mental health needs, but we may be there on a neighbor dispute. So certainly there's a lot to look at here.
Right. My next question is, you said social workers don't want to do this. What does that really mean?
Well, from what we understand is they have no intention of replacing us in the field. They often, and we have the data to back this, that they're calling us for the most part, to come out and assist them, or often, I should say. So a lot of the time, so they don't intend on going out into the field and approaching people that are in crisis without some sort of police protection. So they recognize that that's needed.
Okay. And my last question, maybe this goes to the chief, but you might know too, John. Can we use any of our forfeiture funds to prime the pump here? I understand that we're going to look for grants, et cetera, but might we be able, we have these forfeiture funds and they can be used for new programs often, and I'm wondering if they are allowed.
Yeah, salaries are allowed for certain endeavors, but I think we would have to look at it from, there has to be a nexus to drug activity. So I'd have to look into that, but I would think if drug abuse was tied to the mental health, I think the thread might be able to be put through the needle, but it would be tough. And the salary end of it becomes an ongoing expense. And when you look at asset forfeiture, the yearly expense of the salary, if there was equipment associated with that, we could pursue things like that. But I think when we talk long-term salaries and institutional change on how we do this and who we're going to bring in, I think that should probably go through the legislative process.
Right. Well, we've used this money in the past to prime the pump, to get things going, and then once that's done, to run it through the normal annual budget process. So that's all I'm asking is whether or not we might be able to use our forfeiture money to help us get through this Police Accountability Act stuff that they're forcing us to do.
We'll certainly explore it. But if this is a public-private partnership, with some of these companies are that we're looking at, then that would be prohibited for sure.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a really quick question as well. A scenario of one of these calls, and there's a social worker in our building at the police station, or would they actually possibly come with the officer through the call?
Depending on the model that we went with, right now that we do have social workers that are available to us if needed. We can call both Branford Counseling or BH Care and have a response. I think the idea is to have a better response, a faster response, and then there's a lot of different follow-up that can be done outside of just a response to a crisis situation. There's court advocacy, there's assisting officers with traumatic incidents, and people and families, domestic violence, homelessness, definitely, drug addiction, drug abuse, alcohol abuse. So those are all things that our officers deal with on a daily basis. So having someone working amongst us seems to be the best model. And there will be times where they can respond to crisis alongside us, and other times where, maybe we don't need them actually at that scene anyway. So we pick and choose.
Okay.
All right, so I'll leave it the deputy's remarks
Thank you,
there,
John.
but I'll get that report to you for next month. A very impressive report. I commend the deputy for the work on that and taking the lead on this. As we move on to some of the overview of the CompStat report proper, our traffic efforts, we're still out there doing our radar enforcement. For some of you who might have seen an increase in the speed trailers, we have 3 of them now, and we're rotating those consistently. We're getting some good results with them. As far as our Part 1 crimes, everything's pretty much stable. What I will point out, that we point out pretty much every month, is during September we had 5 cars stolen. Of the 5, all 5 had keys in them. All of them are unlocked. But what is striking is that year to date, we've had 85 stolen motor vehicles out of the town of Branford. That's a 60% increase from last year. And we're not the only ones. This is a statewide, a countywide issue. There's been some causation as far as what is it, why, and there's a whole host of issues. But I will say that our officers on midnight shift have encountered these offenders several times, and they do engage us in a pursuit, which we will not chase them if it's a non-violent crime, and the theft of an auto is. So please at this point, engage in best practices, and that's lock your vehicle. Again, all of them, pretty much all of them are unlocked. Cases of significance that just highlight, last month we went to the Days Inn for a robbery with a handgun of a party in the parking lot. The detectives are digging into this. The parties may have had some contact, and there may have been some other type of activity associated with this. There was another robbery at another hotel. Suspect was confronted by 2 individuals. He was assaulted, and some property was taken from him. The detectives followed this up, learned that the victim and offender were acquaintances. They did know each other, and an arrest is pending for that suspect. Over on East Main Street, an East Main Street resident was returning from his place of business in New Haven at 3:30 in the morning. He was in his driveway. He was robbed at gunpoint by a lone assailant, demanded money. There was a struggle, and the victim was struck in the head. The detectives are, again, on top of this case. They've developed a few suspects, and they are pursuing all those leads. If you recall, back in December of 2019, we had a robbery at the Chowder Pot restaurant. They have secured 2 arrest warrants for 2 convicted felons from that case. One of them is currently incarcerated, so we have to work on getting him presented in court. So that case is pretty much closed at this point. Good work on the detectives. It was a long-term investigation with a lot of legwork on their end, a tremendous amount of search warrants, but they didn't give up. So I commend them for a job well done there. As far as our motor vehicle accidents, overall year to date, we're down 15%. Let's not take all the credit for that. I think, some of the COVID is related to that. As far as the injury, I have nothing to report. On the forfeiture report, you'll see a small expenditure related to finishing up the furniture project in the Detective Bureau. This was some logo and design work we had done on one of the walls there. If you recall, we had purchased some refurbished office equipment via state contract. That project's wrapped up and finished. I do have one letter that came in from Peter Jackson from the 3rd District, RTM, commending Officer Mike Loftus. It was during an accident, and thankfully no one was physically injured, but Officer Loftus was most helpful and comforting and acted commendably. He reflected very well on the Branford Police Department, and he wanted to reach out and let us know that. So we appreciate taking the time, and we appreciate everything the men and women have been doing out there in these tough times. But with that, I'll end my report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
At this point, I would like to turn this over to Peter and the traffic committee.
All right. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Chief. We have 5 items. The first and second are carryovers from earlier in the year. We did have engineering weigh in, and item 1 is a request for appropriate signage at the intersection of Cedar and Rose Streets. And what has been recommended there by the town engineer, and this would be my motion, is that we conditionally approve, to take funding, a right turn lane on Cedar Street just north of the entrance into the East Shore Catholic Academy, with appropriate street markings and signage. And so that's the motion for item.
I'd like to ask somebody to make that as a motion, please. Can somebody make that as a motion, please?
I'll make that motion that we have proper.
Second, please. Can I have a second?
I second it.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Item 2, it's really related to 1, but that's for larger sign on Cedar Street, more signage at the intersection with Rose. And what the town engineer recommended there were signs indicating that oncoming traffic does not stop. And that would be a sign at both stop signs, the one on Cedar Street heading north and the one on Rose Street, they're actually heading west and turning either south or north. So that should be a motion also.
Would somebody make the appropriate motion, please?
So moved.
Second, please.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Item 3 came in as a request to remove 5 parking spaces on Thimble Islands Road near the crosswalks that are in the vicinity of the town beach. Our town engineer took a look at that and made the recommendation for better sight lines that at this time we remove 20 feet back on the side that traffic is coming to the sidewalk parking by painting the curb and putting up an appropriate signage, no parking here to crosswalk.
Okay, can we get a motion, please?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then item 5 is a request for signage on Route 146 in the vicinity of the Amtrak crossover near, or it's actually in Guilford, but the Branford town line is a couple of 100 feet away. And so one of the signs that might end up in Branford. No action at this time. We know that after the first of the year, there's supposed to be public notice and encouragement for public input to the entire length of Route 146 from its western border at the Western Rotary on Route 1 in Branford to its eastern border where Route 146 meets Route 1 on the Madison side of the center of Guilford. So there's really no action at this time that'll take place come the first of the year. That's my report.
Peter, I'm sorry, but item number 4, you had on there too for Route 142 Shore Drive.
Oh, I skipped right over it. I went to 5. I apologize. Yeah.
No, that's okay. I just want to make sure we go back to item number 4.
Thank you. Going back to item number 4, traffic calming on Shore Drive. The chief, deputy chief have been doing studies, analysis. They've also, I guess, been in contact with some of the folks that are involved with the Stony Creek Short Beach Association. We're looking for traffic calming there. It's still an ongoing activity. The only motion that I would look for at this time is Clark, in that just north of Route 142, is going to be repaved probably later this month. And there is presently a traffic hump that will be ground away. And the question that I had was, do we replace the hump? I did communicate with the town engineer and Public Works, and they're in favor of putting it back. They both think it's been effective in calming some traffic. So I would look for a motion to restore the hump with the new surfacing of Lower Court Street.
Can I have a motion, please?
A motion to restore that hump.
Second, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great.
Now that
Just
concludes
for the
my
record, I'm
traffic.
sorry, Peter, and I'm sorry, just for the record, you said Court, but that's actually on Clark.
I said Court. It's actually on Clark. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And just also, we didn't mention it, but we are, I guess, going to look into the concept of having perhaps more permanent speed signs in that section going forward as well.
That sounds like, that's the communications the chief deputy have been having, and the study, et cetera. So that's that'll, if that's what they want, they'll come back to us and say that's what we want. Yep.
Yeah, it's a definite maybe, but I
Right.
thought I would add that just because it was part of the discussion.
Yes.
As I have no particular report of the chair, other than to send my condolences to the Manor family. He was a wonderful guy. Do we have any citizens' comments at this time? If not, I'd like to get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. We'll see you all next month.
See y'all. Be
You
well.
got it.
Everyone.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.